We are in the second week of a series we're calling The Gravity of Greed. It's not a super long series. It's about a 3-week series. And we are talking about what greed does to our hearts, what it does to our minds, how it affects the desired life we want to live. And then also the remedy in a lot of ways to greed, which is generosity, right? And I continue to say generosity, and it's interesting when you talk to people about generosity, they say, well, you mean giving money. And yeah, we mean giving money because you show me someone that is never generous with their money, and I'll show you someone that doesn't really understand generosity. But generosity is so much deeper than just giving your money. People can give money and not necessarily be generous. Being generous has to do with being generative. That's the key root of the word, right? That you are a creator of life because you're generating. And it's interesting, right? That generous people are generative. They create life around them. You want to be around them just naturally if they are a generative person socially. You want to be around people that want to have a good time, maybe even with money or just spending time focused on and energies on you. Whatever that looks like, it tends to be that generous people are life-giving people. So to that end, that's the process of the push against the gravity and the black hole that is greed is this push towards generative, generous living. It's why Jesus was so magnetic, right? That Jesus was magnetic in that he was generous and generative all of the time. That in everything that he did, regardless of whether even we think he should have been focused on himself, Jesus took the perspective of God and loved us regardless of where we found ourselves. And so this morning, I want us to look at being generative with our time. And, it's interesting because I think for many people, time is a resource that we don't necessarily realize we have. There's a young seminary couple, and they were getting ready to graduate in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And as they were getting ready to graduate, they were having their firstborn kid. And so it was an exciting time in their life. This pastor was going to graduate. They were going to move to a new congregation in Macon, Georgia. He was graduating with honors, and they were about 2 weeks out, and the pregnancy came, and, oh, hey, we're back. And in those moments, the Lord blessed. And so the child was born, and they went, and they began their ministry together. Well, over the next 9 months, the child kind of started to develop this cough that wouldn't go away. And not only did the baby begin to develop this cough, it seemed to just have a really hard time gaining weight. And it wasn't necessarily super unhealthy, but just it would not gain the right amount of weight that a newborn, a 3-month-old, a 9-month-old should gain. And so they went to the doctor just to check to see if everything was okay. The doctor ran a full panel and came back and said, well, Mr. and Mrs. Hughes, your son, Luke, has a disease called cystic fibrosis. And his life is going to never be really the same. And now, this was back in 1988. Things were a little bit different medically in a lot of different ways. And some of you may even remember the early 80s in regards to just medicine and life in general and society, back before the internet. But all of a sudden, their perspective, their reality, their life, their view of time, their view of their energy and their perspective changed. What were they going to do? What was going to happen? What did time look like over the next few years for this father and mother, for this husband and wife, for this pastor and his wife? And that's obviously my mom and my dad, and they're great people. If you've had the opportunity to meet them, if you haven't had the opportunity to meet them yet, you will eventually. They'll come poking around here, especially now that my father has just recently retired from 49 years of ministry. But the process of time comes crashing in. And really, for many of us, time becomes most real when we realize mortality. That for us, time becomes most vital when we realize that eventually it does come to an end. And so for many people, you don't realize what you have until it is really placed out on the table as to this is going to last for a while, and then it's going to come to an end. And so that's what this couple was facing with in this moment. But today we're going to look at a parable, and we're going to look at what do we do with the question and the human struggle of that mortality. Because I think for many of us, we ignore it. We pretend to try and put it off, and not think about it. We let it consume us, some of us. Some of us, we look at it and we say, okay, well, if I only get a certain number of years, this is my time, these are my years, and nobody's going to tell me what to do with it unless I'm going to do something with it. And we treat it like a commodity or a pile of gold that is ours and ours alone. And so Jesus has a different perspective. So he's going to teach the disciples about this. And so he tells this parable. Beginning in Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12, verse 16, it says this. Then Jesus told them a parable. A rich man's land was very productive. So there's this man, his land was very productive. He thought to himself, what should I do since I don't have anywhere to store my crops? I will do this, he said. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones and store all of my grain and goods there. Then I will say to myself, you have many goods stored up for many years. Take it easy, eat, drink, and enjoy yourself. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life is demanded of you, and the things that you have prepared, whose will they be? That's how it will be with the one who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. See, Jesus introduces this perspective of a generosity of resources and time. There's this man, right? And he is, we're told, very productive land. Now, here in Calhoun, we appreciate that probably a little bit more than most people in the country, that having productive land, having productive cattle is a great thing. It's one thing to have a cow. It's another thing to have a cow that is really good at having babies. Because ultimately, it's an investment. And if you get a good investment, you feel like you're on top of the world. And so this man, that's what he finds himself in this situation. He says, what am I going to do with all my good luck? What am I going to do with all of my great investments? I know what I'll do. Since I can't hold any more of my blessings, I'll tear down my barns and my storage and make room for even more blessings. What he's saying in this moment is, hey, listen, I don't have enough yet. Have you ever been there? Thought, well, like my security is like, well, I don't have enough yet. Or like, if I could just get this, or if I could have this one more thing, then I would be where I needed to be. You know, or maybe like in the sense of time, it sounds a lot like this. It sounds like this. If I just had 25 more minutes in the day, I could do what I needed to get done. And listen, 24 hours is great and all, but if I could just tear down the barns and have 48 hours in the day, that would be perfect. If I could have 10 hours of me time, 10 minutes of me time, 10 hours, wow. You know, even 10 minutes of me time, everything would be great. And in this moment, in this parable, God comes to the man and he says, hey, listen, see, you thought what you owned was your own. And now the only thing that mattered is being taken away from you. He says, see, you thought you owned all these resources. You thought you owned all these barns. You thought because of these things, you had some level of control over your life. But I'm the master, and there's no control outside of obedience to me. See, the first point I want us to understand this morning is this. You can consume your life trying to control it. You can consume your life, your entire life, trying to control it. James 4:13 says this, come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will travel to such and such a city and spend a year there and do business and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring, what your life will be. For you are like vapor that appears for a little while, then you vanish. Instead, you should always say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. See, you can consume your life trying to control it. You know what comes with a great amount of money or a great amount of resources or a great amount of relationships? A great amount of problems. A great amount of struggles and obstacles. And in fact, the more we try to consume or control our lives or hold them steady and get, in a sense, a foundation, the more that slips away. It's why Jesus said that you and we try to hold our lives so tightly. Yet in trying to hold our lives so tightly, that's when life slips through our fingers. That we should actually open up our hands, give control to the Father to find true life. And that's what James says in this moment, right? He says, listen, you don't even know how many hairs are on your head. You don't even know how the world truly works. And to try and control something that you aren't over is frustrating and ultimately accounts for nothing. And what's crazy is that you and I can spend our entire lives wrestling with that reality. So instead of doing something with our time, we could spend our time wondering if we're ever going to do something. And so what Jesus suggests is something altogether different than just worrying about yourself. That you and I, the gravity of greed is that we turn and we look more and more inward. That we say, well, I've only got so much time, and I've only got so many resources, and I can only do so many things, and I, me, and we look continually inward. But Jesus says, but don't miss it. The crazy thing about that is you're worried about your barns, and you're worried about your wealth, and you're worried about your investments, and then one day you're worried about your travel expenses, you're worried about your business plans, and one day your heart's going to stop beating. I mean, I'm not trying to be morbid, but you do realize that. One day your heart is going to stop beating. I know I've said it before, but 1 in 1 people die. None of us make it out of this thing alive. And when that happens, what did you live for? Jesus believes, the Bible teaches, God shows us, there's more to live for than just yourself. There's more to live for than just yourself. In fact, Hebrews 11:4 gives us a window into that. Hebrews 11:4 says this, by faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. So you remember Cain and Abel, the sons of Adam and Eve? They bring their first offerings to the Lord, and it says Abel brought a better offering. By faith, he was commended as righteous. So there's something about Abel's offering that showed faith. When God spoke well of his offering, then God spoke well of his offering. And by faith, Abel still speaks, even though he is dead. So don't miss this. What the scriptures are saying in this moment is that Cain's offering, Cain's gift, Cain's response to the Lord in worship was done in faith, and done in faith in a way that it echoes this point right there at the end, that it still speaks. So the way he worshiped, the way he moved, the way he walked with God still speaks, even though what? He is dead. You know what they call that? Legacy. They call that legacy. When your work and your worship speak even though you're dead, when your investment speaks even though you've passed out of this life, they call that legacy. Abel had a legacy. It's a great challenge to each one of us that we can give generously an offering that goes beyond us. Now, in order to get there, things must shift in our heart and our mind in regards to the flow, the gravitational flow of greed. The second point of this morning is this: greed says, take care of me. So that's what greed always says. Take care of me. You're going to die one day, take care of you. You only have so much money, take care of you. There's only so much food in the world, take care of you. But generosity says, serve others. Greed says, take care of me. Generosity says, serve others. See, the greatest enemy of greed is generosity. It's the reversal of the flow of saying, well, this is all about me, to saying, okay, I'm going to serve others. And what you'll find is that struggle, that process, that pursuit, it's making something even more of you. Because the moment you decide to be generous, you're going to find 1,000 reasons that that person does not deserve generosity. Have you ever noticed that? That you go to give to someone and then you realize, oh, hey, this person doesn't really deserve it. Have you ever given maybe to a homeless individual and then they go to the Wendy's counter, and I'm not saying anything personal experience, but then they pull a wad of 100s out of their pocket to find the change at the bottom of their pocket to use the $5 that you just gave them? That we as human beings, we don't necessarily, very rarely actually, do we deserve generosity. But that's the very picture of the gospel. The very picture of the good news of God in Jesus is that God does not look at you and me and say, do they deserve it? Because do you know what the answer would be? No. They don't. But God is a God of generosity, not a God of greed. And what we begin to find is that, especially when it comes to time, that you and I, the struggle is that we make room for less than. And what I mean by that is this. So we make room for what we think is important. And so the excuses we hear, the struggles we face, we begin to make excuses for why we can't be generous. That we look around and, Cain made excuses. He says to God, hey, why do you favor my brother over me? So he says, hey, God, this is just favoritism. You there's nothing inherently in what Abel's doing faith-filled. It's just the fact that you like him more than you like me. Or we may say something like, well, that person doesn't deserve it because they would mismanage the money. Or we may say, hey, I can't be generous in my time because I don't want to miss this season of life with my family. I'll never get it back. And listen, sometimes in balance, those discussions are valid, right? So the questions of being there for tournament ball and baseball and soccer and every other sport under the sun. I understand, especially as you get older, there are seasons for students and kids to enjoy and play sports. And so I'm not saying you're a bad person if you're missing church to go practice or do tournament schedules or things like that. But what I am saying is this: we make time for the things that we consider important. So instead of the fact of us saying, I don't have time enough to do that, maybe we should just go ahead and admit and say, I don't have enough value for this thing I say I value. Because we make time for what's important. We give time to what's important. Point 3 is this: we must practice the Sabbath. We must practice Sabbath. And I say, well, how does this fit into time? How does practicing the Sabbath fit into time? Well, this is just a real-world strategy to help us better give our time. Now, you might say, well, again, how does worship, the day of worship, help me better give my time? Well, think back to this process. It honors God's control over what he's supposed to have control over, which is your time. Right? I want you to understand, originally, the Hebrew people, right? They're coming out of Egypt. They're building a nation. And not only are they building a nation, they're building an identity, they're building a people. And what God says is, hey, listen, one of the identifying factors of what you're going to do is one day of the work week, you're going to do nothing. Well, Lord, I mean, we're already behind. We can't possibly catch up. We need every day we can get. And you're telling us you want us to sit around and do nothing for one day? Well, no, not actually. I don't actually want you to sit around and do nothing. I want you to honor the fact that I'm the center, I'm the control of your universe. And that I can take control and do more with 6 days than you could ever possibly do with 7 days. That when you serve me, that when you honor me, when you make me the main thing, you give your time and your talent and your treasure and your ownership of your life over to me, I can do immensely more with 6 days than you could ever do with 7. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to rest one day a week. Because guess what? This life is exhausting. See, we think God's just adding stuff to our plate, right? It's like, God, don't you realize I have 0 time? Like, I already have a ton that I have to do, and you're putting all of this stuff on my plate. No, God's the one saying, hey, life is exhausting. Here's an entire day that I desire for you to rest. Here's an entire day where I want you to sit and I want you to realize you're not in control. You're not leading this thing. So we honor the Sabbath. We practice the Sabbath. Why? Because it teaches us to give of our time. It teaches us generosity with our time, with the person that is most able to take that precious investment and use it wisely first, which is God. Which is God. You really, now don't get me wrong, I'm not naive, okay? So like, preachers invite you to church for a whole host of reasons. But when we're doing it really well, you know what we're inviting you into? That conversation. Come experience the Lord with me. Come and taste and see that the Lord is good. Find him to be like a spring in the desert. Find him to be like the snow on the mountaintop. Find him to be strong and reliable like the winds of the desert. Come and experience the Lord. Or like Joey says, come and magnify the Lord with me. Teaches us to give our time to him that is able to use it most. And the second, we must give away our time. We must give away our time. Listen, I try to come up with a really cool, pithy saying for this one, but it's just the truth, okay? If you want to learn to be less greedy with your time, you need to give away your time. It's, again, that very simple reversal of the flow in your life. If you're going in one direction, repentance is turning around. So if you are myopically focusing more and more on you, on your time, on what you need, on how you don't have enough time, then you need to just in faith say, okay, God, show me that I have enough time to serve. Show me how to do this well. And, I'll close with this. There's a reward for believers that engage in this. And now you have to be careful because you can get close. When people hear trigger words, they think like the prosperity gospel. They think like, hey, do this, you'll be blessed in this way. That's not how theology works. That's not how Jesus works. Jesus isn't like held hostage by your obedient actions to give you a blessing. Like, it's the blessing of a father with his gifts to the son or to the daughter. Like, you don't go to your dad. It's actually disrespectful to go to your dad and say, hey, you're going to give me this gift. So we're not talking about the prosperity gospel here, but Jesus is saying something real, and I want you to hear it. Mark 10. So this is at the end of the prodigal son. So the prodigal son is another parable about generosity. But this is at the end of the prodigal son. Matthew 10:29 says this. Truly I tell you, Jesus replied, no one who has left home or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or fields for me and the gospel will fail to receive 100 times as much in this present age. Did you get that? Anyone who has left these things will not fail to receive 100 times as much in this present age. Homes, brothers, sisters, mothers, children, and fields, along with persecutions. Along with persecutions. And in the age to come, eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and the last first. So what's Jesus saying in this moment? Well, Jesus is saying this. Hey, listen, if you engage in this struggle, if you are someone that chooses, like, okay, I'm not going to hold on to the status quo. I'm going to look for generosity. I'm going to try and give. I'm going to try and make less of me and more of Christ. What does Jesus say? Jesus says in this moment, if you give those things away, if in the giving you begin to find your identity, then you will receive far more than you give. Again, it's that Shabbat principle, that Sabbath principle, right? He said, listen, I can do far more with 6 days than you could ever do in your own power with 7. What's Jesus saying in this moment? He's saying, listen, you give away your 7th day. You give away the things that you think are most important, the sons and the daughters and the fathers. Now, don't get me wrong, we're not talking about abandoning your family here, all right? There's some metaphor in this process of understanding what's going on. In your fields, in your businesses, and you give these things away, and you will receive 100 times what you gave away. Now, as well as persecutions. But, and don't miss this, in the age to come, eternal life. Because, disciples, I don't want you to miss it. There's some here, they got a lot of time, and they got a lot of talent, and they got a lot of treasure, and they look like they're first, but they're last. But there's some here, like that, you remember that lady in the temple that only had 2 mites left. Put everything she had into the offering plate. Because she knew knew that God could do far more with her 2 mites than she could ever do on her own. And there's 100 times her reward for the leaving, the sacrificing, the giving up. And those that look like they're last, they're going to be first. But ultimately, eternal life for her in the age to come. You know, that same couple, they would grow up with a son who was a normal son in a lot of ways. Loved his parents, took care of them. They loved him. Invested a lot of time, a lot of talent, a lot of treasure into his life. Not knowing what would happen. They could put in a lot of time, a lot of talent, and a lot of treasure, and he could go the way that they had thought it would have gone about 10 to 20 years ago. It would have passed away at about 10 years old. But they just kept believing, and they kept investing. And then it was 15 years, and then it was 25, 35 years, then it was 45 years, and now Belmont Baptist Church is stuck with him. But one of the most honoring things to me is that for them, they can stand and say, we were faithful with what the Lord gave us. Time, talent, and treasure. One day, you'll take the last beat of your heart. Will you be able to say, I was faithful with all that God has given me? My time, my talent, and my treasure.